Hello and welcome to today's Shed Life. Here we are again, International Women's Day. I so wish we didn't need International Women's Day, but we still do. And you will have seen the stats. The pandemic, unfortunately, has actually taken us backwards in some respects. So I'm even more delighted to be joined by a guest today that can really give us some insight about what it's like to be operating in what's traditionally been a man's world. And this is particularly relevant when this year's theme of International Women's Day is Break the Bias. So here is Charlotte Riley. I'm pleased to say she's a partner of mine now because Charlotte works as part of the AMPA group. She's a director of the cyber consultancy firm that we have in the group called CSS Assure, but has the most jaw-dropping background in that she's previously worked in the British Army and for NATO. And Charlotte really knows her stuff when it comes to cyber, but both being in the armed services and also in tech. These are both male-dominated sectors, aren't they, Charlotte? So what has it been like for you working in that world?
Thanks for the lovely introduction, Sarah. I'm a little bit embarrassed, but it's great to be here. It's been a journey. I joined the army at a young age. I went straight to an army college. So it's something that's almost ingrained in me now. I'm so used to it. I'd say my overall takeaway has been positive, and I've tried to put some of the negative experiences, behind me and move on. I think you adapt to your environment. So it's become second nature to work in a very male-dominated place. And I think my opinions have changed back and forth over the years on where I fit, how I operate in that environment, if that makes sense. So when I was younger, I would just, try and fit in, not put my head above the parapet, just do my time. And then, as I've moved on through my career, I feel like I've tried to engage more and make positive changes, but without bringing and breeding negativity into my environment as well.
Charlotte, you talk in a very positive sense. I'm not surprised knowing you that you talk very positively, but can you give us examples of some of the challenges that you faced?
I think one of my personal frustrations is when I've been in a room, when I've had an opinion, and this is certainly when I was in more junior roles, that I wouldn't be listened to, essentially. I feel like I'd have something to say. I'd probably be the subject matter expert in a room, and I'd try and get my opinion across, and I wouldn't be listened to. And we can speculate on why those reasons are, but that is something that personally upsets me. And I'm in a more senior role now. People almost have to listen to me, but when I didn't have that behind me, that was such a struggle. And I've left jobs over it. The wrong group of people. I've not found my way to be sort of successful in that environment, and so I've had to leave jobs because of it. And that was hard. That was a hard pill to swallow because I felt like I had a lot to give.
But also ridiculous for the organisations that you've left because they're losing talent. I mean, it just makes no sense not to include people when you think of all that kind of talent. And I know how much of a subject matter expert you are. So I hear this a lot, by the way, I'm sure you do, about struggling to make our voices heard. I also know from personal experience that you're right. The more senior we get, we can just bulldoze our way into a conversation.
You can.
Yes.
And you don't care anymore. It's almost like you don't have those scruples because you have to do it.
You do. And you, maybe it's something about confidence or just the confidence that having the job title or the badge or whatever gives you. But how do we remove bias for those that aren't yet at the point where they've got a fancy job title? How do we make sure that the people coming after us don't face the same thing?
I think it's driving a level of understanding between people. At the end of the day, if people understand each other better, they're going to operate in a more effective way together. So I think this is a difficult subject because, and I think I was in a debate conversation with you about it. You don't want to drive animosity between people. So the positive reinforcement that drives sort of negativity and animosity and separate, is more divisive. That's not what we want. We want understanding between gender roles and the problems that both genders face. I don't think I have the perfect answer, but I think it's finding a positive way to drive that understanding.
And I love what you said about understanding between people, because ultimately we're all individuals. It's not about, you can't box the entire population into either male or female. We're all different, aren't we? So, and there are guys that have as much in common with us as there are women that have in common with guys. So it's not that straightforward. But why do we still need International Women's Day if we're all just people?
I think we need to remember where we came from. And that's something that I need reminding about sometimes, because I think the career that I've been able to forge might sound a bit cheesy, but has been enabled by the people that came before me. So I think remembering that plight, and remembering any bias, anything that's gone wrong in the past, we need to learn those lessons and remember those lessons. So I think it's about remembering the challenges that women have faced, their successes, and then how do we move on from here?
Thanks, Charlotte. And it's not just about women, is it? If we get better gender equality, there are benefits for men too.
Absolutely. I think the more successful that women can be in the workplace and in their environment, then that's going to drive better business. It's going to drive improvements in many ways. Both socially and at work. And also, as I mentioned before, that there are gender issues that affect men very much so. So I think us both being aware of each other and the plight of men, the plight of women, I think it's just going to drive a more positive, rounded future.
There's something about choice for both men and women. And I think you make a very relevant point. I know there are stigmas for men about working part-time or perhaps spending more time with their children or, looking after elderly parents, whatever it may be, having that flexibility for men. And I think until we make that equally as socially acceptable for a guy to take the back seat or work part-time or whatever it may be, we're not going to be able to level things up. So for me, this is about everybody having the same choices in both ways, actually.
I think so, absolutely. There are still very specific gender roles that do affect men. If they wanted to stay at home and look after a child, they should be able to do that. Men's mental health and the stigmas around that, there needs to be huge improvements, and I think there needs to be support in the workplace for them as well.
Absolutely. It's not just in the workplace, actually. My husband used to do most of our childcare. He was more of a stay-at-home dad, although he was also studying and doing various other things. And he would be the only guy at times waiting in the playground, standing by himself while all the mums were chatting to each other. So there's every part of society has got to make this acceptable for it to be truly integrated. But allyship is something that I've heard an increasing amount about in the last few years. And I really get now why this is important. But what do you think men can do as allies to help us get this balance for everybody?
I think it's about seeing past stereotypes and relearning how you judge people when you first meet them. So if a beautiful woman walks into the room and she's the CEO of a company, then you judge that person on merit and not what you see and know about her gender, for example, the way she looks. So I think for men to explore that, explore how they operate as an individual, as a group when they're in a, say, the way they act when a group of men are together, just essentially thinking, I think being more aware of the situation and maybe exploring how they act and respond to stereotypes.
I think that's important. That stereotype thing is a massive change, that if we can just shift that, I agree with you. And for me, allyship has got to be active as well. I think it was recently that Desmond Tutu, there was one of the quotes going around about Desmond Tutu about just agreeing but not doing anything is actually the equivalent of siding with the opposition. I mean, it was made in a different context, but I can see that here as well. So this is about activity. So have you seen a change in your time in the workforce? Please say yes. Yes.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting to give an international perspective to it, because I'd say it's different. So I've worked in both the United States. I've worked in NATO in an international environment. I've worked in England, and it's quite nice to say, as my mother country, you know, the United Kingdom is, I think, more advanced in this. I think we see a significant amount of female leaders. The culture in the workplace is much improved, and I think some of the countries have a ways to go to catch up, but it's nice to see us leading the charge.
That's good to hear. And in terms of if you could roll it forward, what would you like to see in 5 years' time that would feel a bit different to where we are now?
I think seeing those stats improve, you know, the stats that we're seeing in terms of, you know, the glass ceiling, the pay disparity. It'd be nice to not be having those conversations anymore, and, you know, and I think a little bit of openness and honesty about how corporations are acting and why they're doing some of the things that they are in terms of pay disparity. Just you know, be honest about what's going on behind closed doors.
Thanks, Charlotte. And you're absolutely right. We need to be able to measure it, because these are fine words, aren't they? But we now need to see things coming through so that we can physically see things have changed. So, inspirational women, who's inspired you to be the leader that you are?
Well, I suppose I've got to say my mum, right? She'd if she ever sees this, she'd go mad if I didn't. But no, actually, she was a single parent. Didn't have a huge amount of qualifications when she had both myself and my brother, and she forged a career from nothing, essentially, and did a great job and was very successful. So I think, you know, seeing her do that was definitely inspiring.
Real role model by the sound of it, then.
Absolutely, and she loves Margaret Thatcher. Like, that's her role model. So you can,
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it was important. People needed to see, whatever your politics, you need to see somebody like you doing a job, and then you believe that you can do it as well. So yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely. So a couple of final quick questions. So 3 words that describe a great leader, in your opinion.
In my opinion, I think fair. Got to be fair to everybody. Brave and inspiring. You've got to inspire people to follow you into wherever it is you're taking them.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. And finally, a motto or a quote that means something to you?
So this is very simple, but it's kind of it's been my New Year's resolution for a few years, and it's just be better, do better, essentially. You know, where you can leave something of better than you found it, and that's the best way to go about things.
Do you know, I've only known you a short time, but I had a feeling that you would say that, because that's my experience. Yeah, I did actually. That's my experience of working with you guys. So, and thank you for sharing your insights for us today, and thank you for being a role model for so many people as well. We need to keep talking about this. You said it earlier, it is getting a bit boring having to say the same thing and go through yet another International Women's Day, but we've got to keep talking to make sure that the action follows, and then we hold ourselves to account. So thank you for sharing that with us today, Charlotte.
Absolutely.
And, thank you very much.